Welcome, everyone, to the Comedy Sports Podcast with your host, Christine Rollo Capriolo. And now, the person who puts the play in Playwright, John Bottomline Leicht.
Welcome back, my wonderful listeners, to the ComedySportz Podcast. It's me, Christine Rollo Capriolo. I have an amazing surprise for you today, listeners. I've got one of the originals, the guy who was back then there with the original Dick Chudnow and the rest of those cuckoo birds. I've got John Leicht today. John, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This is an honor to have you here. I've heard your name weaved throughout the history of ComedySportz, so I'm excited to hear your stories from ComedySportz back when it started.
I'd be interested in hear how that's woven. But
Well, we'll have to go back and review the tape. But I know Dick has mentioned you quite a bit and some of the early guys. But first, I always start with where were you born and raised?
Right around here, just south of here, Racine, Wisconsin.
Okay, Racine, Wisconsin.
And then went to school in Madison.
Mm-hmm. What'd you study?
Doing philosophy.
Really?
And second in English. And then my first job after graduating was managing an Arby's roast beef restaurant. So I went from studying philosophy to doing Arby's. It was a wonderful transition.
And how did philosophy help you working at Arby's?
Well, I thought about sandwiches a lot.
You did?
I did. But strangely enough, later on in my business career, I owned a marketing agency. Philosophy came into play a lot.
Really?
Because I really learned that philosophy isn't a noun. You know, like somebody will ask you, what's your philosophy? Well, I don't have one.
Uh-huh.
Philosophy is more of a verb than a noun. It's how you think.
Okay.
And that's what I learned in philosophy, was really how to really think critically, which was a great background for marketing.
So if I were to ask you then, how do you think? Or how do you think differently than someone else? What?
I have no idea.
I don't even know if that's a valid question. How do you think?
I just think. But it teaches you to recognize, what is a valid way of making an argument or making a thought pattern, and what is an invalid one. So that's to me the real value of philosophy.
Interesting.
It just teaches you to think critically.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people don't have that skill.
A lot of people.
Yeah. Many.
Yeah. And I seem to forget it every once in a while, as Kay, my wife, will remind me.
So what year did you graduate from the University of Madison?
University, I think it was like 71.
71.
Something like that. And, my third year at the university was the one where, massive demonstrations.
Right.
Helicopters flying around, dropping tear gas canisters on us and everything.
Were you there for the bombing?
The bombing happened during the summer, and then everything stopped.
Okay.
Everything just came to a complete, utter stop.
Wow.
It was eerie.
Yeah, and must have been.
It was. Yeah, so very different years. And then, like I say, I made the wonderful transition from studying philosophy to managing an Arby's roast beef restaurant.
And was that in Madison as well?
What happened is that my last semester, I only had to take 2 courses because I had racked up credits and everything like that. So there was one philosophy course, which was the philosophy of language that I really wanted to center on.
Okay.
And then I took an easy course, that I went to on the first day of class and the last day of class.
Yep. Did you get an A?
I got an A.
You did. First day, last day.
Well, it was music appreciation, and I like classical music, so I knew all the pieces. That they were going to study, so I just came in and aced it. That was easy.
Nice.
But the philosophy of language course was very, very difficult, but great. I learned more in that class. I think I got a B.
Okay.
But I had to work like hell for it.
A B's a good grade. I always tell my students a B's a good grade.
So I had some extra time during that semester. I decided to get a part-time job, and I applied at Arby's.
Okay.
And I walked in, and they went, holy cow, college grad, let's make him the night manager. So,
okay, so there you go.
So I became the night manager, and after I graduated, they say, how would you like to manage one down in Milwaukee? I said, okay. But before that, I had applied for a job as a copywriter at a radio station in Milwaukee, and I finished second. I was the runner-up.
Okay.
So I took the job at Arby's, and about a year later, the radio station calls me and says, well, our guy walked out.
He's gone.
Gone. Are you still interested? I said, I'm there. When do you want me? So.
Okay.
It was the lowest rated radio station in Milwaukee. It was, like I said, it's when country western music was still twangy and very country, and had the lowest ratings. So they relied on the copywriter to write commercials for local businesses, and the salesman would produce those commercials in the studio downstairs. Salespeople would take the commercials out and sell them. That's how they sold time. So there were times when I would write, 10 commercials an hour,
Wow.
and just churning them out. But it was through those years I wrote a lot for the ear, writing radio, and it became ingrained. I developed a very good ear, which is I wanted to do my own writing, and I had wanted to write novels, but between my 20s and late 20s, I was trying to do novels. I also had young writer's disease, which is that you don't do enough of it, right?
Yeah.
You talk about, I'm going to be a writer someday, and then one day I just said, okay, you're going to do this or not. So I started writing, and everything started to turn to dialogue. So I started doing plays. Okay. And then once I started writing plays, I thought, well, I should take some acting lessons and see what the other, who I'm writing for, how they have to learn. And that's when I got hooked up with Bob Orvis, who called me one afternoon and says, John, you got to come down to sing. We're getting together, and there's a guy named Dick Chudnow who is starting this new thing. And he says, just come on down. It eventually is what turned into ComedySportz. But
so
it was.
You were taking a class at UW Milwaukee on acting and met Bob?
I was taking it at the time they had classes at the Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
So it was the Performing Arts Center School of Drama. And you're right, UWM had a great acting program at that time. Really, I knew a lot of the guys there. Mm-hmm. And what was funny about my old job at the radio station is that the guy who got the job instead of me, the first one, he turned out to be one of the original founders of Theater X.
Oh.
Okay.
Talented
guy. And then there was me, and I eventually went to the Milwaukee Rep, and then I hired Bob Orvis to replace me. So it's like they had that radio station had some.
They lucked out.
They had some pretty good talent walking through there because Bob is just amazing. Some of the things that he's done.
Oh, sure.
With improv.
Yeah.
I mean, he took it to a real zenith.
So Bob calls you, says you got to come down here. Where's here? Where are we talking?
I think it was at the Jewish Center. Or
the Jewish Community Center.
Jewish Community Center, where the first, and we got a space, and we just. Dick kind of outlined competitive improv.
Okay.
And it was,
had you done improv before?
I had not.
Okay.
I had not. But we had one favorite phrase, which is failure is your friend.
Failure is your friend.
Because, you're going to fail. Yeah. And then you get up and you do it again and you succeed.
Do it again. Yep.
So everybody was just kind of feeling their way along. And there was one person especially that I've always remembered from the original group. And she stands out to me because of who she was. And that was Rosie Friedman.
Mm-hmm, Rosie.
And Rosie, just big heart.
Yes.
And everything.
She was a sweetheart.
Sweetheart. But not a naturally gifted comedian. Mm-hmm. Not a naturally gifted, funny person. But she had decided she was going to do this.
Okay.
And she did.
She did.
And all of us kind of, I think, rallied around her.
Yeah.
And just did nothing, but support. And she became good.
She did.
She became really good.
She could do arms expert like nobody's business.
Like nobody's business.
She'd steal your wallet and you'd let her.
She was great. I mean, Rosie found, her thing.
Her niche, yeah.
And I'm not a naturally funny guy. There were people in the original group who were. John Bank, who could walk onto a stage and just say the word pickle, and people would start laughing.
Why did I start laughing? I don't
know. Exactly. But John could just do that. John was a gifted, both physical and word-wise comedian. And Bob Orvis, Bob was so quick, so fast, and everything. And Marvin Berkowitz, just so quick, so fast. Brian Green, he could just do anything. And Nancy Garrett Nash, very natural, funny person. But I come back to Rosie because I think Rosie kind of grounded us, because we all wanted her to succeed, and she did. She grew, she got it, and it was just such a great thing to see.
That's wonderful.
That was wonderful.
So even from the start, you were all very supportive of one another.
Oh, without
question.
question.
Had each other's back.
Without question.
Yeah.
There was no. I didn't see any backfighting or anything like that. It was just support.
So from this call from Bob, hey, come down here, you got to check this out.
Yeah.
Then you start hanging out with this group of people.
Right.
And what do you remember, before you started actually doing shows for the public, what do you remember from those times of getting together?
We would just do the games.
Yeah.
We would just practice the games and get familiar with it so you didn't. The biggest thing, and you'd read a little bit too, and I forget the one book, the one author, but I go back and I read those first few pages of, I think it's called Impro. But I read those first few pages about once a year. Because the point he's making is that there are things you have to unlearn. It used to be when we did start doing shows, people would say, how do you think that fast?
Yeah.
And as you know, the whole point is to not think.
Right.
It's just to react.
Yeah.
And part of my problem is that being a writer,
and a philosophy major.
I do think.
You think too much.
So yeah. And so I had to unlearn a lot in order to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't coming natural to me. So most of the early successes that I would say that I had on stage, I don't remember. Because then I was just free-flowing, which was rare for me.
Yeah.
Because I was doing too much thinking on stage,
Yeah.
But the moments when you got into the groove, which you probably know, it just feels so good.
It does. It feels like a runner's high, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's just...
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So the early times, we were just trying to figure out what was working, what was not working, what games were working, what games weren't working. But again, without being at all dictatorial, Dick had a clear idea of where he wanted to go and what he wanted this to become. But at no time did he say, look, this is what we got. He was kind of a gentle massager, and you put 10 improv people together. It's going to be herding cats for sure.
Right.
But Dick had a clear idea of where we were going, and slowly but surely, just kind of put it together. And then we opened up at Cults. And
right.
The important part of it, I think, was also building the stage at Cults, doing the actual nailing of the wood.
Actually building the stage.
We actually built the stage.
Yeah, physically did it.
And physically doing that was an important part of it. We were building our space.
Right.
And so there was a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
And just, again, the team all coming together.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was nothing but support by everybody.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of relate to that because after Cults, it was moved to Jefferson Street.
Right.
And then moving from Jefferson to where it is now in Milwaukee on 420 South 1st Street.
Yeah.
I remember helping. I painted the mural on a wall. I put up, I made frames. I hung T-shirts and, we painted. And so you're right, that ownership.
Yep.
And then just feeling that, it just rejuvenated us who are helping. Like this was our family. This is our home. This is where we're going to be now.
Exactly. And that's what brings you together as a group.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The late hours doing stuff that the audience will never even know happened, but we know, and it bonded us together.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. I started at Cults when I was in high school, so I've been at all three places.
Okay.
But I had the privilege of helping make this on First Street.
Yeah. Well, I had lived in the neighborhood where Colts
Okay.
was. I lived over on Bartlett, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so I had gone to Colts for many years with my wife at the time. And once we actually started to think, I guess we're going to open in Colts. I went, okay, that's home too.
Sure.
You know,
you already were familiar with it.
Yeah. And it ultimately, I think, put Henry out of business. But, you know, it ruined his business.
It did? How? How's that?
In a strange way. I don't know this for sure, but I think it just changed the demographics of his business.
Okay.
It was a good place. It was a neighborhood place, and it was, you know, there were all sorts of people, but a lot of older people still came there during the day for lunch, you know, or for dinner and everything. And once ComedySportz took off, which to our amazement, it did.
Yeah.
I think that it changed Henry's business.
Yeah.
It had been there for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was, wow, you know.
Well, so what do you remember then? Do you remember the first show at Colts?
I don't.
No?
No, it's only because it's blur. I did it for 3 years.
Right.
So you're doing it every weekend for 3 years. And it just blended all into one big experience.
Yeah.
You know, early on, I remember, because people were going, who are these people and why are they funny?
Right. But why are they funny?
You know,
why are they making me laugh? Knock it off.
Yeah. Well, why should some people would come in, hold their arms, and go, okay, make me laugh. You know?
It's a challenge, right?
And so what you're doing a lot of times is working just to unfold their arms.
Right.
You know. But that wasn't necessary because it was funny.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just free-flowing. Lord knows what's going to happen.
Right.
Fun.
Improv.
And every once in a while they could say, hey, I got a new game. Let's try this. And we'd rehearse it or get used to it and everything. Then we'd try it and say, that didn't work, or that or that worked. Okay, that did, you know.
Right. Do you remember having a favorite game?
Well, there was one game that would start each night out called What Are You Doing? It was my worst game.
Your worst game?
Worst, because you know how to play
that?
Yeah, okay. So you've got to think 180 degrees. And as an associative person, as a writer, I'm used to associating and not disassociating. And so for me to do that game, I was out in one or two, right? I mean, you know, I was, you know, Marvin's wife, Judy. I mean, she blew that whistle so many early times on me, you know, John, you're out.
You're out, get out of here.
Gone. And, you know, people like Bob Orvis or Marvin, they could do that one, Brian even.
Yeah.
They could do that game forever.
Right.
I mean, just ad infinitum. They could keep doing. It was just a hard game for me to do.
Yeah.
But one time, after I had left, because like I say, I was there 3 years, I left to work with the Milwaukee Rep, because my playwriting career was starting to take off. But we came back to do kind of one of the early...
like tournaments or championships? Like a reunion?
Reunion show, thank you for the word. And I came back and I said, okay, Dick, here's what I want to do for What Are You Doing? Because you know it's my worst game. I said, I want to bring up my black Royal manual typewriter.
Okay.
Okay. And so, you know, Judy can start it, and Bob will get up there and go, you know, what are you doing? And I'll take out the typewriter, I'll put in some paper, and I'll think for a moment. I'll type it in, and then I'll say, bouncing a ball. And so we did it for that, and then Judy, of course, whistled me out.
Yeah.
You know, and everything, but we did it by typewriter and just slowed it down completely and just broke all the rules, and it was fun. You know, it was just...
So if you struggled with What Are You Doing, what improv games do you feel like you really excelled at?
Anytime we got into a scene that was physical,
yeah,
that I could really get into, because then I didn't have to think.
Yeah.
Then I wasn't thinking. And I know John Bank and I once got into a ping pong game with Roger Roger
Huebner doing sound.
Doing sound in the back. And we had the best ping pong game that was ever played at Colts.
Yeah. With Roger doing, I can't even pretend it.
Yeah, exactly. And we were, hitting it behind our, and everything, but I had a gas doing it.
That's great.
But like I say, a lot of the times that I think were my better moments are ones I don't remember.
Because you were so into it.
Because I was into it.
Yeah.
Like I say, improv itself was somewhat difficult for me because I do think. So unthinking or getting that attitude of thinking out while you're on stage was sometimes difficult for me. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you said every once in a while Dick would come in and say, hey, I've got a new game.
Yeah.
Did you guys come up with new games too? Do you remember?
People would come up with ideas, yeah, sure, and say, hey, why don't we try this? And we'd try it, and if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember John Bank and I, we went down one time to Chicago.
Okay.
And one of the original guys down at Second City was doing improv in the long form. And we went down there, and that was instructive. That was fun to watch. Then we started to get some longer games. And especially there were the ones where you're telling a story, and then you have to back it up, which I had trouble with because I could tell the story, but then I couldn't remember all the parts. So.
Are the parts to go back? Kind of like a forward reverse, going backwards?
Yeah, right. That was tough because, that's right. You got to walk around this bush. I don't know. So.
Right. Well, how were the audiences early on? Do you remember, were they small and suddenly, word got around?
The early audiences were mostly people we knew.
Okay, sure.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, and it's just a general thing, theater in general, the audience wants you to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They want you to. So when you're dealing with improv where you can fail, and then you get up again and you succeed, they love it.
Yeah.
And they enjoy it. And they're part of that process. And that's what makes improv live works because of what it is.
Yeah.
To me, improv does not work on television.
No,
I
agree.
It just flattens out.
Yeah.
But the audience is very much a part of it because they really want to see, okay, we gave you this suggestion. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Right, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and everything. And you feel like you're completing it for the audience. So it's very... There's a real connection with the audience. Yeah, word just kind of got out. As word got out, we get new people in there. And like I say, people would come in with their arms crossed, and then you just see them uncross. And then suddenly they're having fun.
They're having fun.
And everybody's having fun.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. Yeah.
How has improv, when you started...
Yeah.
Do you continue to use improv throughout your life? And now you left, you said, I guess I'm going a little too fast. You left after 3 years to begin writing at the Milwaukee Rep. Right. Right?
Right. Well, to me, writing is doing improv in front of a typewriter.
Oh, interesting.
Or in front of a keyboard of some kind. But you can't flow until you have information, until you've done your homework. Improv, you've done your homework by living your life. You're just pulling information from all your senses that has put things and visuals and words and stuff into your head. So there's a real close connection. And I used improv a lot in business.
Really?
Like I say, I had a marketing firm, and it happened to be our specialty was launching food products for companies like Kraft, Sargento, Birdseye, Hormel. And I was making a presentation one time, big presentation. I had worked on it for a long time. And so, the client's in the room with 10 of their people, the president of the company and the head marketing guy and, everybody else. And I'm making this presentation of how I think this product should be introduced and what it should be. And I was speaking from a podium, and in the front of the podium, there was a sign that I was going to fall down to reveal reveal the big concept and everything. And so, I had practiced it many times, but when it came to do it, I turned down the sign and I looked over, and for the first time, well, the word was upside down to me because I'm looking down at it, right? And it threw me. So I was supposed to say what this one-word concept was. This was the thing that I'm building in the presentation, for all this time. And I went, and the whole point of this is, so improv, you're taught, okay, use what you got. That's what I had.
There you go. But they loved it.
And they did.
Yes.
Because it actually, by making the mistake,
Sure.
it made it come home even more.
Well, right, and loosened people up.
It loosened
right?
everybody up. Yeah, absolutely. So I used improv a lot, just in terms of mindset.
Yeah.
And, Bob Orvis always said this. Bob was there the night that Robin Williams came and played. Robin Williams was a great listener. And it's really, improv is about listening.
Yes.
And so, same thing in business.
Sure.
Listen. Don't just sit there and talk at the client. Listen to what they really want.
Yeah.
So you get the core of what they're trying to communicate to you, to communicate to their audience.
And also, not just listening to their words, but their body language. Read the room, right?
Read the room.
Yes.
Without question.
Yes, that's important. And that's what I think a lot of people miss sometimes. They're not really reading the audience. And they want to play, let's play 6 things where the referee has to get all these suggestions.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, haven't you read the room? They're not saying a word. They don't want to talk. They don't want to give any information. You can't get a suggestion out of these people. Why would we play a heavy suggestion game?
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's really important, too.
Well, I used to see a lot of, and Bob has done great work on this. He's actually written a book that I hope will should be published.
Okay.
But about improv and business and everything. It's a great book. But anyway, there have been times when, you get in a room and the president of the company says, and everybody, of course, stiffens up.
Sure. The big guys there, right?
The big guys here.
Yeah.
I just never let them do that. I would just start listening, but I would do the equivalent of breaking the folded arms.
Yeah.
In business.
Yeah.
And just listening to what they're saying and really hear it and dig in and try to root out what they really want to say. Yeah. And then people open up, and suddenly you had people just talking normally.
Sure,
and
relaxing.
Relaxing, and without there being deference to the fact that the big guy is, or girl, or woman is in the room.
So you're listening, you're observing, you're really being in the moment, which is really what improv is.
Which is what improv is.
Yeah,
so I use improv through business a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So those 3 years.
Those 3 years it was the University of Life.
Oh, I love that. The University of Life.
It really was.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. So when you left, did you leave for good, or did you occasionally come back and play?
I had to leave. Well, it was a very difficult decision to make.
I'm sure.
Because I didn't want to leave.
Right.
I was having
too much fun.
I was having too much fun. I really was. But I was getting into a serious thing with the rep, so I said I better put full attention to this.
Yeah.
And so I talked to Dick. I came in and I said, I'm going to have to drop out, and we talked about it. He understood. There was no rancor or anything like that. And as you know, guess what? ComedySportz went on just fine without me.
There's always been a little missing part.
Yeah, the old fist in the water bucket test, pull it out. The hole that's left is how much you missed.
It went on, but did you come back occasionally, visit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You still...
kept in touch, especially with people like Bob, Marvin, and everything. And then as new people came in, because that second wave, they were so good, too. They were just funny people. That second and third wave of people were people who really wanted to do this.
Right.
And they were great. You got Blaze.
Angela Farina.
Yeah,
And then Joe Cortese.
And
Bruce Brinker.
Yeah.
Down there.
John
Polesnik.
Yeah. They saw what was happening with ComedySportz.
Right.
And I think they took it
new level.
To a new level.
It continues to grow
yeah.
and change.
Yeah.
As it should, right?
Absolutely.
As everything in life should, as
Absolutely.
we grow and change.
Yeah.
So you continued to grow and change and started writing for the Milwaukee Repertory Theater.
Yep.
And wrote a couple plays.
Got into trouble.
Got into trouble? What does that mean?
Well, the first
Is
play...
that what his parole officer is over here? What do you mean?
John Dillon, who was the artistic director at the time, who recently just passed away. I went out to his celebration, his life celebration out in Seattle. But anyway, John was artistic director, had been there for many of the formative years. And he asked me to look into an event that had exploded a couple of years prior onto the scene in Milwaukee, and that was it had to do with the shooting in 1958 of Daniel Bell, young black man. And he was shot, and it was covered up by the 2 Milwaukee police who shot him. The entire police force, the police chief, the district attorney.
Oh, my.
I mean, it was covered up, period.
Wow.
And then was buried for years. And finally, in I think it was the late 70s, came out on 60 Minutes because one of the policemen came forward for all the worst reasons in the world, but came forward and told about what had actually happened.
Yeah.
You know, that they placed the knife in the kid's hand. You know, to make it look like he had been...
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry, but they placed the knife in his hand. And John asked me to look into it because John was a good friend of Walt Kelly, who was one of the lawyers for the Bell family.
Okay.
And Walt introduced me to the young man who was killed, name was Daniel Bell, introduced me to Daniel's sister, Sylvia. And in Sylvia, I met one of the most amazing women I've ever met in my life, a woman. And improv had a lot to do with this, okay? Strangely enough. Because I got to meet her for the first time, and we started talking about the event and her years since, you know, because 2.5 decades, you know, between the whole thing. And her journey through this experience. And I said, at the end of our first time, I said, I'd really like to talk more, but I'd like to get to know you. And she looked at me, kind of a twinkle in her eye, and she says, well, I sell corn at the farmer's market every Saturday at dawn. And I said, mind if I sell corn with you? She says, I'd love it. So I sold corn with Sylvia all summer long.
Yeah.
And that's how we got to know each other. And so as we developed a good relationship, and as she got to trust me more and more, she revealed to me her journey about the death of her brother and what happened. And one day it was just kind of a magic moment. And again, improv, you're just knowing that moment.
Yeah.
You know? And we were just talking one day, and she says, you know, I got a call from one of my attorneys one day because they won in Milwaukee, but then the city took them to federal court in Chicago. And one of her 4 attorneys called her and was arguing because the city was offering a settlement.
Okay.
And he was saying, take the money. He was afraid he wasn't going to get paid. And he was telling her to take the money, take the settlement. And she said, I don't want the money. I want a verdict. That's when I knew we had a play.
Okay.
And
I thought that's where you were going. So you wrote a play about this.
Yeah. And she became the focus of the play. And it was her play was called An American Journey. And it's about the journey through. Of course, I went back to John. He had asked me, he says, investigate this, see if there's a play there. I said, there is.
Yeah.
I said, but we also need a black writer on it. I said, you know, I can write dialogue, that's easy, but I'm a white boy. You know.
That's not your experience.
Yeah, and I said, I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
And I'm talking from a cultural aspect, just from a general philosophical aspect, if you will. And so he hooked me up with another playwright out of New York by the name of Kermit Frazier, and we wrote it together. Wow. And he came out, he got to know Sylvia, and then we wrote it together. And the play did extremely well.
Wow.
And it was produced out in Philadelphia and was going to go to New York, but the guy at Lincoln Center says, I love the play, guys. It's a great play. It's a wonderful play. But he says, it's too common a story, which was an editorial in and of itself, the killing of a young black man by police.
And how many years later are we? And it is a very common story.
At the time that the play was actually produced at the Rep, almost the same thing happened.
Oh,
right during
that run.
Yeah, during that run.
Has it been revived, this play, to come back?
No, it's very expensive to do. There's a lot of actors in it.
Yeah.
And again, there's a feeling that it's too common a problem. Dramatically, give me something new is what theater is going to say. But what the story of a young black man shot by police and covered up, it's too common a story.
That's terrible.
Isn't it?
I want to read this play.
It's a good play. It finally did get published, which was nice,
It did.
And everything. So it's been published.
And what was it called? An American Journey?
An American Journey.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good play. Good
wow.
play. But my success was due to the death of a person.
Yeah.
So you had to keep that in mind.
Right. Like, how do you reconcile that as your...
It's not so much reconcile as acknowledge.
Acknowledge, okay.
Just don't pat yourself on the back. You just did your part.
Right. I'm telling the story. I'm bringing it,
And we told it the very best way we could.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, that play would... very present moment as well.
It caused a stir, yeah.
Are the other plays you've written... also based on something that happened? Or
well, it was funny because while writing this play, I got to know, I can't remember her name, a lovely lady. She was the head of the Wisconsin ACLU at the time.
Okay.
Great lady. And she said, have you ever read about the Progressive case? And I said, yeah, I seem to recall. She said, I've got the file, legal file, if you want to run through it. So she gave me the legal file, and I went through it, and I went, yeah, this is a play. But what, in a nutshell, back in, I think, the late 70s, early 80s, the Progressive magazine is based in Madison.
Okay.
And they ran an article, How to Make a Hydrogen Bomb. So I got to meet the journalist who did it. His name was Howard Moreland. Great guy. And he had a rather exceptional experience. He was a transport pilot during the Vietnam War. Being a transport pilot means you fly kids over and body bags back.
Oh, God.
That was his job.
Oh,
kids over, body bags back. And that kind of worked on him for a while.
Wear on somebody, I would think, yes.
Yeah. So he had this idea, which was idealistic, but somewhat ajar.
Yeah.
That if I write an article about how to build the bomb, that'll make it real for people so that we can have a national discussion about it. And the editor of the Progressive magazine, he went to him, and he was a great guy. He was an old, hard-bitten journalist, used to work the Washington Post, so he'd been around the block many, many times. And he grabbed onto it, but he saw a principle there about First Amendment issues. So once word got out that they were going to do this, the government clapped down on him. And you have to remember, this is the Jimmy Carter government, came down on it. And so they were trying to get them to not publish it before it's published. Okay, so that was suppression of First Amendment, obviously. Well, anyway, what ultimately happened is that the federal government took them to court. They wound up in federal court. And Howard, the guy who wrote it, and Irwin, the editor, who were being sued by the federal government, could not attend their own trial because they did not have official sanction to talk about the subject that they had already
written about.
Okay.
Okay. This sounds like nonsense.
It was.
Yeah.
And so there was only one way to do the play, and that was to do it as you just blow it up.
Yeah.
So I blew it up. And it was a crazy play. And it was nutty. So
back to your first production.
Yeah.
And you're living your life when you were in Madison during all these protests and these, and then your first production about the killing of a black man in what did you say, 58?
58.
1958.
When it happened.
And then now, in 2024, it's all just too familiar.
It's all just too familiar, which was the original complaint that Kermit took the play to his friend.
Yeah.
He knew, he was a director at Lincoln Center. And the guy loved it, loved the play. He says, it's well written, it's a beautiful play. He says, but it's too common a story.
Well, when we're talking 60, 70 years later, and it still is.
It's still too common.
How do you feel then, as just a human being in this world?
Every time it comes up, Kermit and I talk. First of all, I had the good fortune of getting a lifelong friendship out of this with Kermit.
Not to mention his name is Kermit.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know, Kermit the Frog, right?
It's okay. He gets that all the time.
Friendly visions of that.
But he's a damn good writer. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, neither he nor I can really tell who wrote what.
Oh, sure.
In the play.
Yeah.
Originally I wrote a certain section, he wrote a section, and then we just started passing pages back and forth, and we're doing this. And nobody ever tried to outshine the other. It was just a perfect.
What a wonderful partnership.
Perfect partnership.
Yeah.
And John Dillon did a very tricky thing after that summer of talking with Sylvia, and then I'd flown down to meet other members of the family because there were 13 children. Sylvia was right in the middle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And John wrote a little note to us on one of the pages of the script. He says, I'm going to submit this to like Sundance or something like that. And he said, note the due date. This was September. Due date was December. So I just looked at Kermit and I said, okay, I'll do the first act, you do the second act. And then we'll pass pages one together.
Yeah.
And, but John's whole point was to get us out of research and onto the page.
Just do it. Start. Yeah.
He never even submitted it.
No?
No. But it was his way of getting us
going
onto paper.
Yeah.
And getting us going. So when we did that play then, we did it at the Rep's second stage then, which was the Court Street Theater. But the interesting thing is that the actors, they were aware of it. They were getting new pages every night.
Oh, okay.
And so sometimes they were holding pages in their hands, sometimes they weren't.
Yeah.
And one time we came in, they had 12 new pages, and they did it. They were great. They were on it and did it. So anyway, we were still over at the PAC at the time. And then they were starting to do the fundraising for where they are now. Mm-hmm. And I understand that's being torn down and redone again. But anyway, they were just starting to get the funding for what became the Powerhouse Theater. Mm-hmm. But I remember, John got into a little trouble because the board said, okay, let me get this straight. You want us to go out and raise $300 million, and you're doing a play about the killing of Daniel Bell? And John said, yeah, this is the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, not the Acme Repertory Theater.
Wow.
And to the board's credit, they got their job done. But to John's credit, they got this play done. This play was notorious for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible story.
It was good to be a part of it.
Does it break your heart that the world hasn't changed that much?
It's been broken several times, so it just, But I'm also, I don't want to say I'm an optimist, but I get up every morning and I love life. And
that's wonderful.
And I write every morning.
You're still writing?
Absolutely.
Plays?
Actually, I haven't done a play in a while, but I got the idea for one. And so it's just now kind of percolating a little bit. while I finish a novel that I'm working on.
Oh, you're writing a novel.
Writing one. It's called The Last Newspaper. And it's about the death of the newspaper industry, which we're watching happen
yes,
right in front of us.
Yeah.
And
is this your first novel?
No, I've written a couple of practice novels. And I don't want to say exited playwriting. I just suspended it for a couple of reasons. But when I turned back to the novel form, I had to go back and start all over again. It's a totally different animal.
Really?
And I had to go back to writing 101.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do a couple practice novels just to play with the form until I felt as comfy in those waters as I had in playwriting. I felt very comfy with playwriting. I just felt real comfortable.
How many plays have you written?
Oh, probably about 6 or 7.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
And everything. Most of them have been produced.
Yeah.
Except for one.
Except for that one.
Here's one, but there's a history to it of almost being produced. And stuff like that.
So now you're writing a novel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I may come back and do this play, which is going to be about cheese.
About cheese? Interesting. Cheese. Those in Milwaukee will be very excited.
Oh,
Wisconsin,
I'm sure.
To
hear
about this.
It's a good Wisconsin subject.
So I'm curious, you started doing improv in '84 for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And right now, as we're recording, it is the end of summer. It's August of 2024. And we just had our 40th ComedySportz anniversary championship in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And you went there.
I did.
So for someone who did it only in the 80s to come back, what is this draw? What's the pull that brings you back?
Well, I would, every once in a while, I'd pop down and see a show.
Yeah.
And everything. And then when my wife had passed away about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then I was lucky enough to meet Kay, who's sitting over there.
Yes, our lovely friend here.
And she is an engineer. And so, you know, I talked about adversity. Well, her adversity was being a female engineer back when there were no female engineers.
Yeah, when there were none.
So she's got quite a story to tell. Anyway, lucky
Move
enough.
over here, Kay. No.
Yeah, next program.
Screw improv. We're changing the world.
But it's been. I was lucky enough to meet her, and then we just talk. You know, she has a very extensive mind, and she just flows to different subjects. You know, but.
Oh, look at you two in love. I love
Absolutely.
I love it.
So what I was getting up to, long way to answer your question, I took her last year, you know, down to see ComedySportz.
Yeah, ComedySportz.
And then we've seen Chicago ComedySportz.
Okay.
So she was familiar with it. So when Dick wrote me an email, he says, hey, we're having a 40th. Can you get together? I said, just let me know when, and I'll be there.
Nice.
And so it was great.
And what do you notice, or what do you feel walking into that place with these people from cities all over the country and all over the world?
Yeah.
Now,
I feel like I was right back in the middle of it.
oh my gosh.
It was just walking in. I could go up and be on stage and be as inept now as I was then.
Just as terrible at what are you doing now as I was
just
back
as bad
then.
at what are you doing now
I don't know
as
what
I
I'm
was.
doing. I can't do this game.
Exactly.
Were you there when they gave out the certificates?
Yes.
The originals?
Yeah.
Congrats.
I got a certificate.
Yes.
And I forget the joke I made about it, but it was a bad. I was the original. What's the penalty for a pun?
A groaner foul?
A groaner. I originated the groaner.
You originated the groaner foul.
The groaner
it was
foul.
you.
I am the culprit. Yes, because I went to language a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow. I know you didn't do a show at this 40th anniversary, but
Right.
if you did, what's the one game you definitely want to play? Can you remember some of the games that? Not what are you doing, I guess.
Not what are you doing, for sure. Like I say, Bob and Marvin, and they could go on and do that game ad infinitum. But I would probably, I'd want to do a scene with John Bank. I can't, unfortunately.
He's passed,
John
yes, as
passed.
well.
But John and I became great friends over the years.
Yeah.
And we just spent a lot of time together. But I would love to do a scene that would just be something physical and slow motion.
Physical and slow motion?
I liked slow motion.
Yeah?
Like I say, I did a thing with John where we were playing a game of ping pong.
Yeah.
And it was just one of them moments that was fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, or the game we mentioned before, forward, reverse, where you're doing a scene and you switch backwards or whatever.
I can do the forward part. I just can't remember the reverse.
I can't go back. No, but when people just kind of stand there and just talk, just two standing bodies talking, that's brutal, and it's hard for the audience. It's boring.
Yeah.
But the physical, like you're saying, the physical comedy, here you are playing a ping pong match. There is really not a ping pong ball.
Right.
But Roger Hebner in the back making it sound like there is.
Roger created it.
Yes. And so then that's his moment, and the crowd gets into that.
Roger was so good at what he did, supplying those sounds. It's what Spielberg once said about E.T. He said, the bicycle going over the moon. He says, but it was the music that made him fly.
Yes.
And it was Roger's sounds that completed the ping pong ball or the ping pong game. His sounds were such an incredible part.
Oh, yeah. He was incredible.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. We've never really gotten a sound back. I mean, every once in a while, someone in the booth will. But you're right. I mean, that was a whole part of the show that...
He was a character.
Yeah, he was a character of the show, right, that no one would see.
Right.
But he was there.
But he could do all the sound effects and just keep up with whatever we were doing on stage, and he could do it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
He was incredible.
Yeah, he was.
Wow.
He was great.
Well, I like to end this. This has been fascinating. I could just talk to you forever, just about just the history of the country, and let alone improv. But I like to end with some games. I have a quick lightning round. Are you into pop culture at all? How about pop culture of the 70s and 80s?
You're about to find out, I
Let's
suggest.
see. I'll start with your favorite ice cream flavor.
I had it just the other night. Raspberry chocolate chip.
Raspberry chocolate chip. Oh, that's a whole new level. Favorite bird?
Bird.
Give me a bird. I'm a birder. You see my shirt? I like birds.
Well, birds are cool.
Birds are cool. They are.
But I was reading, what are the pterodactyls?
Dinosaur?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was reading about them in Scientific American the other day, and about the transition that the dinosaurs and the size of their brains. You call them a bird brain, right?
Brain.
Bird actually have good-sized brains.
For the size of their body, they
the
certainly
size of their
do.
body.
The hummbird is one of the smartest birds and most curious
I
birds.
used to have a hummingbird feeder outside my writing studio, and it was just when they were there during the summer month.
Yes.
Watching those little helicopters.
Oh my, they're amazing.
Yeah.
We'll say the hummingbird. Hummingbird, favorite bird. Before we play a little What Are You Doing Here, I do want to ask about your nickname, Bottomline, John Bottomline Leicht. Where did that nickname come from?
I think it came from the fact that at the time, I was principal of a business. And it was a marketing group. We had 16 employees, which is a nice size little business. And Dick just saw me as a business guy, which I was probably not the best business guy that's ever come around, but I was different, and we had a very different place. And our place was very improv-oriented at work.
Yeah.
And, rule was, do your job.
Yeah.
Okay, you can come in when you please. Well, you got to be here for meetings.
Yeah.
But we were one of the early, no set hours, but get your job done.
Right, you better work, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we only hired people who would do that.
Okay.
Who would get the job done. And so we had a good group. We had a good group of people, and they were very creative. And my business partner, he was a brilliant designer. So it was just, it was great.
You were the bottom line.
I was the bottom line.
All right, I'm going to pull out one of these cards here, the Would You Rather questions. All right. Got a couple different categories. Okay. We have pain, fear, and discomfort. That's a category.
Pain, fear, and discomfort. Yeah. Oh, good. My favorite three.
Appearance and embarrassment. That's another category. Food and ingestion is another category. Ethics and intellect. Or finally, random.
Oh, wait a minute. Ethics and intellect.
I thought you'd go for
I'm
that.
not sure that's a compatibility.
No, that's just on the card. I
Okay,
the
all
cards.
right. Okay.
Is that the one you want to try?
Well, there's a reason I fell in love with philosophy. Mm-hmm. I grew up watching the astronauts, right? So I wanted to be an astronaut.
Really?
So I thought I'd take aeronautical engineering, become an astronaut, right? And I found out I couldn't do math.
Oh.
So which is
you kind of need that.
It's a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Kay maintains that I just had poor math teachers.
Well, sure. Yeah, blame it on us, the teachers.
Yeah,
sure.
there you go.
That's fine, Kay. I see how you work.
Yeah, right. Exactly. My problem with math is that when I would read a postulate, I would say, well, why is that true? And you're not supposed to ask that question. You're just supposed to accept it and go on. Well,
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
But then I discovered philosophy where you could question anything.
You can question anything and everything.
It was like the whole world, just the skies. It rained.
Gosh.
It rained philosophy. It's great.
So should we go for ethics?
Yes, I like that
and
one.
Intellect? All right. I'm trying to find a really good one. Would you rather be the world's expert in one field or have a trace of knowledge in all subjects?
Trace of knowledge in all subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can talk a whole bunch about a lot of things.
Well, so you can, kind of know a little about a lot.
Yeah. Would you rather be a boy in a plastic bubble or the Elephant Man?
I'd rather be an elephant in a bubble.
Oh, we're going to end on that because that would be amazing. John, Bottomline, Leicht, this has been incredible meeting you and talking to you. I really appreciate you sharing your story and your experiences and your playwriting and how improv has kind of just been there throughout your whole life.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. The ComedySportz Podcast is produced and engineered by Kyle Hanneken. Our announcer is PJ Rockwell. Feel free to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Comments and inquiries can be sent to the ComedySportz Podcast at gmail.com. Created and hosted by me, Christine Rollo Capriolo. Thanks for listening.
The ComedySportz Podcast is an independent production made by CSz players. The views and opinions expressed by the podcast host and any guests are their own and do not represent the views and opinions of any CSz location or CSz Worldwide. Vocabulary used by the host and guests is not necessarily representative of the CSz brand.